Hello, Alexandra. It's my great pleasure to do your portfolio review, and I'm really excited about this first picture. I think it's absolutely fantastic. You have incredible detail in both the foreground and the background in that far distance, which tells me that you understand how to use apertures properly. You're probably going at f8, at least probably f16 to get that kind of detail. However, for this picture, I feel that you could actually make it even more powerful by simply cropping down. Now, the reason I suggest this is because landscape shots like this often look better in a panoramic format, especially if you're going to frame this picture and place it on your wall, which I think you should because it's such a really nice picture. The lighting is excellent. Now, when we do a cropping, usually a crop tool has the rule of thirds grids. That's like the tic-tac-toe grid that you can see here. Now, when I bring my crop in or down, can you see that the top part of the mountains are now along the top third horizontal line? Maybe hard for you to see that on smaller screens, but essentially, if you crop like so, you now have a panoramic type of image, and I feel that it's going to be a bit stronger. And overall, fantastic shot. So really great work. Let's get to your next picture. And I really, this picture makes me smile because it reminds me of my second home, San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. However, I think that what I initially saw when I saw this picture was a little bit too much clarity. Now, different types of editing software have different names for clarity. For example, it could be sort of a type of contrast. It's usually clarity. It's sort of like a mid-tone contrast. And if you did add clarity to this picture, great. Maybe it's just a little bit too heavy because I feel that I could see that crunchiness up here. However, I like your use of black and white. That's very good. And the only thing I would suggest is that this pillar, and to a lesser extent, this pillar is a little bit too hot. And hot is sort of like an expression for it's just a bit too white. We lose detail here. So I'm using Lightroom CC 2018, some people call it, but it's the cloud-based Lightroom. And what I would do for this shot is simply go to my highlights and reduce them. Now, do you see how we gain what's called information? Information or texture comes back to this column and this column. That's when we reduce highlights. I took it all the way down to -100. Now, this is the original, and this is when we reduce the highlights to regain that texture. Also, we get to see a little bit more texture down here as well, where the bricks are. Now, that wasn't a real deal breaker to begin with, but you can actually play around with selective work as well. For example, if we go to, say, the brush, and we reduced highlights only in certain areas. Let me show you. I'll do an extreme example here. So let's just go with this pillar, and let's go to plus, and we're going to do this pillar as well. Okay, and the nice thing is that you can actually adjust independently each pillar. Do you see how I can adjust this pillar? And now I'm going to go and touch on my blue dot, and I'm going to adjust just that pillar. And this selective editing, this reduction of highlights selectively, is so valuable because you're not going to be reducing what's called the global image, meaning that, okay, sorry, I'm not explaining myself. I'll get rid of these blue dots, and I'm going to go back to my normal editing area. Now, if we reduce highlights down to -100, everything in this picture, all the highlights get reduced. Now, that's okay. And in this picture, it's actually working good. However, with that selective brush work over here, we can actually only adjust that which we want. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So what I'm going to do for this picture, I am going to give you a selective highlight reduction, and I'll email you this picture just so you can have it on file. Okay, now let's go back to what I was talking about with regards to the overall look of the clarity. Okay, so clarity is a sort of a type of contrast that's really popular. The only problem is people use it far too much, and clarity sort of helps you get an HDR look when you don't have true HDR, which is 2 or 3 pictures combined. Now let me show you what clarity does in the extreme. Do you see how crunchy it gets when we increase clarity? Or when you reduce clarity, it's just a bit ghostly. I feel that it's possible that we need a little bit less clarity in this picture. So I'm going to reduce it just a touch, not much though. And if you're a Lightroom CC user, dehaze is another tool that works similarly to clarity. You might want to give that a try as well. Okay, now one thing that I will mention is that we have a little bit of straightening to do here. And we can do that in many ways actually. Under geometry, sometimes you can just go to auto, and whatever tool you're using does a pretty good job at picking vertical lines or horizontal lines and just straightening them. Okay, just see how that happened? Now we have straight lines along this, this window slat or whatever it is. And also relatively straight lines as best it could judge over here on the pillars or the columns. Okay, so that's good. I really like your picture. I think you did a great job. And if you, this is not really necessary, but let's say that you wanted to frame this as well and you have access to custom framing, this little hotspot down here is not a deal breaker. It's not a problem. However, if you were so inclined, you would just crop that out. And this, I feel, is a little bit better. It's more of a panoramic type of crop, which I think looks better framed. Also, you don't have to, but you may just want to get rid of these wires. I'm not sure if they're telephone wires or whatever. And there's a number of ways you could do that. One, you could simply crop it out. That's the quickest and easiest way. So let's say that we're going to crop here. Or the other is if you're proficient with Photoshop or any other editing tool that allows you to erase something like that, you could easily erase it. Now, I don't feel that there's anything risky about cropping to that extent, because it's true you're losing a little bit of ability to blow up in high resolution. However, to be honest, that small amount is really not going to be too visible. In fact, I don't even think anyone could actually see any difference with the naked eye. So that is looking great. I think you have a great picture here, and I'm very happy with it. Good work. Okay, let's get to your third picture. And this is another lovely mountain scene. It looks like you're either blessed to live in a mountainous area, or you visited these areas in the past, which is great. I think this is overall a nice picture. I think what I would say is it's a little bit thin. And when I say thin, I mean I feel that we need a little bit of blacks reduced. Okay, so what that means practically is I'm going to go to light and I'm going to go to blacks. Now the problem you may initially say was, yeah, but you're losing detail, you're losing sort of the visuals down below in the shadow. Well, here's an interesting trick. Why don't you increase the shadows but decrease the blacks? Not many people know that you can actually do this because they think, well, if you're going to reduce shadows, you need to reduce blacks at the same time. Not true. You can actually increase shadows and reduce blacks, and what that does is it gives you the ability to see the shadow areas, but also retain drama. When we reduce blacks, we really retain drama. Now, if you don't use Lightroom CC, that's fine. Most other programs will differentiate between shadows and blacks, so you probably have the ability to work on that. If you're an advanced user, you can use curves. I'm not going to get into curves right now because it's a little bit complex, especially when we have the quick ability to use blacks and shadows. But anyway, the curve will do the same thing. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for this picture. You may want to play around with a little bit of warmth, but that's not really necessary. Let's add just a touch of warmth, see what happens. Okay, that's good. And I feel that the picture is fairly well balanced. Let's go to our crop tool. Yeah. I just always like to see, where is that crop line? Where, is it in line with major parts of the picture? And really, this is a decent shot. We don't need, compositionally speaking, we don't really need to crop it anywhere. You may want to crop it down. Let's say that you have a frame already, and you're going to frame this. Then you're going to sacrifice the sky. Don't sacrifice the green down here. This is really good. If you do have to crop this picture, crop the sky down, and in fact, it may even become a more powerful picture. However, if you don't need to frame this picture, just leave it as is. Great work, nicely done. Okay, let's get to your next picture. Overall, I feel that we just need to warm it up. So I'm going to go to my temperature, and in Lightroom, it's let's say plus 18. However, it'll be different if you don't use Lightroom, but it doesn't matter. Just add a bit of warmth. And I feel that we have just a little bit too bright. We have a bit too much brightness in the highlights on this rock. So there's two things we can do. We can do a global reduction in highlights, and I already showed you where we just utilize the highlights to take everything down. Okay, and that's the quick and easy way. Or we can go to brush tool and only paint the highlights that we feel need to be painted down or reduced. Do you see how we have a red ghost there? That is sort of the way that the computer, or sort of the software, shows that we've been doing some mask work. So I painted on a bit of reduction in highlights on that rock. And now I feel that the picture is a lot more, I guess you would say, balanced. One other thing, with regards to cropping, I do feel that there's a little bit too much, maybe useless information up here, but I know that this is totally subjective. And in fact, a lot of people would say, well, no, because the top part of the mountain needs to be along the horizontal top vertical, this rule of thirds line here. Again, all I'm saying is if you feel that you need to frame this with like a 5:7 instead of a 4:6 ratio, then you're going to probably want to sacrifice a bit of sky. Mainly because I like this sweep here. This is a curve that really attracts me. So I'm tending more toward getting rid of some sky, but I really like to keep this, even though it's a bit muddy and may not initially be all that attractive, but you have this wonderful curve that really draws my eye. So let's just tap this and accept this crop. And I feel that this is a bit of a stronger composition with a little bit of that top cropped off. Okay, let's go to your next and final picture. Now this shot, I think the drama is amazing. However, we have a problem. We call this blown out. The water is just pure white. So in this instance, I feel we can do what's called the global highlight reduction. So in Lightroom CC, I'm under light, and I'm going to go to highlights, and I'm going to take it all the way down to -100. Okay, now we see detail in the white areas of the waterfalls. And also, did you notice that we can see a little bit of cloud up here and a little bit of blue sky peeking out? Let me show you what the original is. This is the original. And by the way, if you're using Lightroom, down here is your before and after button. Now, let's see what happens when we show the original. Do you see that? Back and forth. It's always good to reduce highlights whenever we're dealing with water, because water, if it's flowing, often has white aspects to it. So give the highlights a try, and that's good. Now you could even go further by painting in more bluish up here to bring out that sky. You could probably reduce the highlights even more in the sky. I don't think we should do that though for this picture. I think we should keep it as it is. I really like the shot, and you have your vibrancy of the trees is good. People would tend to be tempted to increase the vibrancy even more, but that's sometimes at the risk of becoming unrealistic. Okay, so that is the review of your 5 pictures. Let's just quickly go through them. We have this shot. That one's very nice, lovely, and that's my favorite. And what I think is probably a Mexican hacienda. Okay, great work, Alexandra. I'm really happy with your shots, and it was a pleasure doing this portfolio review.